Hey, everybody. Welcome to Let's Debate. I'm Let's Farm, and I will be your moderator for tonight's debate. Our topic tonight is Trump's immigration policy ethnic cleansing? And this promises to be an awesome debate. In our first corner, we have P. Barnz, who brings the case that President Trump's immigration policy is ethnic cleansing. And in the other corner, we have GQ bringing the opposition. We will be having up to a 10-minute opening per side, 1 hour of open dialogue, and a short closing statement, followed by audience questions. Remember to tag Let's Debate with your questions for our debaters. Please remember to hit the thumbs up if you like the show, and don't forget to subscribe for more great content. Little reminder to attack the argument and not the debaters or each other. Now, since you're not here to listen to me ramble on, let's get to the show. P. Barnz makes the positive claim, so he will be going first. P. Barnz, the mic's all yours.
Thank you so much, Let's Farm, for moderating. And look, thank you, GQ, for being here. I know it's your first time debating on the channel, and looking forward to a good discussion today. Earlier this week, local news reporters in Harlingen, Texas, captured footage of masked ICE agents unloading 76 children from a recently landed chartered flight. They were then driven by the busload away, presumably to be returned to the concentration camps that they were previously detained in. These children were part of a suspected group of up to 700 strong who were removed from their beds between the hours of 1 a.m. and 2 a.m. And boarded onto planes with the intention of deporting them to Guatemala without having their asylum claims assessed. This type of secretive early morning operation has become quite common with the Trump regime, as it reduces the chances of lawyers and families being alerted to what's actually going on. They do it this way as they know that they're breaking the law. And they're constantly trying to pressure test the US legal system to see what they can get away with. Luckily, lawyers for some of the asylum seekers were able to secure an emergency injunction. And in a move rarely seen from the Trump administration, Trump actually complied with the law and turned the plane around. Many of these children are the victims of child trafficking, they're victims of forced marriage, they're victims of gang violence that would continue if they were deported and returned to Guatemala. None of these 700 children have had their claims to asylum heard, as is their legal right under the US Constitution. These children aren't trendy Aragua. These children weren't emptied from mental institutions. These children aren't poisoning the blood of America. These children aren't eating the dogs. They're children. They're children who are following the correct process to try to migrate to a country that once proudly said, "Give me your poor and those yearning to be free." So I take the positive position that this and other actions of the Trump administration do constitute ethnic cleansing. Let's take a moment to define some of those terms. Ethnic cleansing is the attempt to create an ethnically homogenous geographic area through the deportation or forcible displacement of persons belonging to particular ethnic groups. On the other hand, an immigration policy is a system of laws and regulations that control the entry of those who are permitted to live and work within a particular country. For countries like the US, who are a signatory to the International Convention on the Rights of a Refugee, it should also contain some form of process to assess the asylum claims of those who seek it. The argument I'll be making has three main points. One, Trump's 2024 campaign directly emulates authoritarian regimes of the past that have committed absolute atrocities against minorities in their population. Two, the current actions of the Trump regime are not aligned with a government that is interested in maintaining or reforming immigration policy. And third point, Trump himself and the people that he's chosen to surround himself to plan and operate the actions of DHS have long histories of pushing white supremacist conspiracy theories and policies. So what were Americans sold at the last election when it comes to immigration? Well, they were sold the story of an economic and social emergency that had very little connection with reality. The Marshall Project actually did a text analysis of Trump's statements on immigration policy during the 2024 election. Trump called immigrants criminals over 570 times. Obviously, this is a lie. It's perfectly legal to enter the US to seek asylum, and entering without documentation on a first offence is a civil infraction. It's a traffic ticket. Right now, we know that upwards of 70% of those who detained have never committed a crime in the US. So what Trump is doing has nothing to do with crime, despite what he said. He said that they were coming from jails and mental institutions over 560 times. This is something that Trump appears to have made up on the spot at an NRA in a speech at an NRA convention. When he or the administration's confronted about it, he cites a news story from a publication that he doesn't remember the name of, about a doctor that he doesn't know the name of, speaking from a country that he doesn't remember the location of, who was complaining that the government had deliberately released all of his patients and sent them to the US. It's obviously a lie. He said that they're stealing public benefits over 270 times. As Trump would know, undocumented immigrants don't have access to any public benefits. They can pay in to Social Security and they can pay in to unemployment insurance, but they can't actually access it because they're undocumented. And I'm sure in the open discussion, we'll get into more of the nitty gritty around economics, but immigrants are a net benefit to the economy. So this sort of repetition of lies is a common tactic that's designed to dehumanize minority populations, and it's a key theme in every genocide that we've seen historically. As Voltaire said, anyone who can make you believe absurdities can make you commit atrocities. So that's the sales pitch. What's the reality that we're seeing? Trump has passed a grand total of 0 bills in regard to immigration reform. All he's done is reallocated funding that was designed to feed poor kids at school, and has moved that to fund the world's 16th most powerful military force in ICE. And he's also given state funding for the purposes of building additional concentration camps. Everything that Trump has done thus far has been via his own perceived personal authority, and he's used that perceived authority to inundate the legal system and push its well-established boundaries to breaking point. He declared a fake war against Trentawagua as an excuse to invoke the Alien Enemies Act. He managed to successfully traffic 200 migrants before being blocked by the courts on this. That's still pending in the court. None of them were given due process. We now know that at least 50 of them were in the US completely legally, including the very publicized Kilmar Garcia, and had full rights to be in the country. These men were racially profiled and are now in horrific conditions in CCOT based on the color of their skin. Most of them had been granted temporary right to be in the country based on the likelihood of persecution on their return. The Supreme Court has since stripped that right, and has allowed the Trump regime to start dumping people stateless in third-party countries that they've never set foot in. The most disturbing thing is Trump has now created a system where he can remove undocumented immigrants without the right to see a judge, and allowing state and local law enforcement to assist in this. A complete suspension of habeas corpus, and the right to due process under the 5th and 14th Amendments. As Stephen Miller himself said, the writ of habeas corpus can be suspended at the time of invasion. This is something that he knows is a lie and has no legal support whatsoever. If you're detained without the right to due process, how do you prove that you have a right to be in the US? Due to the earlier mentioned preference for overnight clandestine operations, we currently have absolutely no idea of the status of people who are being kidnapped and deported, other than the fact that they aren't white and they probably have tattoos and other racial signifiers that the Trump regime believes deems them unfit to live in the US. Now, surely you say that the Trump administration would draw a line at trying to deport actual US citizens. Well, no. In April of this year, ICE deported 4 US minors after secretly detaining their families, denying them access to legal advice and ignoring pending legal findings. One of these children, a 5-year-old fully US citizen, had a rare and aggressive form of cancer. And if we look at Trump's executive order that he calls protecting the meaning and value of American citizenship, which would remove birthright citizenship from Americans, which is quite clearly stated in the Constitution as being a right. Trump and Stephen Miller have made it very, very clear that they will personally decide who has a right to American citizenship and not the Constitution. And also probably one of the most egregious executive orders is the rescission of guidelines for enforcement actions in or near sensitive locations. ICE can now terrorize and stake out non-white communities near hospitals, places of worship, and even schools, which they have been caught doing. I think the international community through the UN has made it pretty clear on the thoughts about a regime denying the right to healthcare and education, especially to children. Now, in my view, none of these actions have anything to do with creating a regulated, lawful, sustainable set of policies that administer immigration. This is a terror campaign. It's designed to cause panic. It's designed to cause disorder that can be taken advantage of, like we saw with the federal occupation of LA. It's designed to overwhelm the legal system. It's designed to overwhelm the non-profit organizations who are sometimes the only line of defense for many people that the Trump admin is targeting. So if the intent isn't common sense immigration or even conservative immigration reform, what are they actually up to? Well, let's have a quick look at the plan's architect, Stephen Miller. Stephen Miller started his political life at Duke University with his classmate Richard Spencer, one of the most well-known white supremacists and the father of the US alt-right movement. Miller and Spencer would regularly organize speakers to promote eugenics, scientific racism, nativism, and other extreme right views at Duke University. Miller was also a prominent member of a number of anti-Islamic hate groups, which is where he found himself headhunted into the Republican Party and eventually into the Trump regime. From here, he would be very influential in the editorial content of the far-right Breitbart News. In leaked emails, Miller would regularly share with editor Katie McHugh links and resources regarding common neo-Nazi conspiracy theories, regarding white genocide, replacement theories, discredited theories about race and genetics, promoting positive stories about the neo-Nazi cult favorite book, The Camp of the Saints, suggesting that SAT scores had dropped due to poor and non-white students being able to participate. And one of Stephen's favorite subjects, his admiration of the presidency of Calvin Coolidge, who condemned race mixing and had based his landmark immigration policy on eugenics and what he considered to be biological laws that prevented divergent people from mixing or blending. That's a direct quote from Coolidge. Coolidge's immigration policy at the time caught the eye of an up-and-coming young German corporal who wrote about it warmly in his manifesto that he penned while serving time for his version, for committing his version of January 6th. Miller and Trump have currently now have a system that is more than capable of being expanded beyond immigration and to allow Trump and Miller to personally set the parameters of who is an American, as he's indicated that he will do so. And I think from their shared histories, we can see exactly what they're up to. So, as I say, this isn't an immigration plan. This is a terror campaign that's designed to ethnically cleanse the US and create a white Christian nationalist state. I'm pretty sure I went over a little bit,
Yeah,
but
like just 2 minutes over, but
oh,
no,
I apologize.
no huge deal. But thank you for your opening statement, and we'll now turn to GQ and let him do his opening statement. Take it away, GQ.
Okay, thank you very much. Thank you, P. Barnes. Thank you to the Let's Debate channel. This is my first debate. So sorry if I'm a little rusty, I'm not great at debate, but yeah, and it's fine that you went over time. It's my opening statement isn't too long. Now I heard P. Barnes mention a lot of different things, a lot of issues with the immigration system. He mentioned Trump's campaign looked a lot like other authoritarian regimes. He has an issue with Trump not having a clear pathway or a clear plan for immigration reform. He mentioned racial profiling. He mentioned a lack of due process. What I didn't hear him mention a lot of is ethnicity and which ethnicities are getting cleansed and how they're getting cleansed from the U.S. So I have the same definition that P. Barnes mentioned. Encyclopedia Britannica defines ethnic cleansing as the attempt to create ethnically homogeneous geographic areas through the deportation or forcible displacement of persons belonging to particular ethnic groups. So to say that Trump's immigration policy is ethnic cleansing, P. Barnes has to prove that Trump's policies intend to create an ethnically homogeneous country, presumably one that is majority white because the country is majority white. I presume P. Barnes would argue that people of Hispanic ethnicity are the ones being cleansed from the U.S. due to the majority of illegal aliens in this country being Hispanic, as well as the majority of deportees also being Hispanic. So they kind of happen to coincide. However, in order to prove that Trump's immigration policies are a form of ethnic cleansing, P. Barnes will have to prove that the policies targeting Hispanics, um, that the policies target Hispanics in particular because they're Hispanic, and not simply because of their legal status. On top of that, P. Barnes will have to show how deportation of Hispanic illegal migrants qualifies as ethnic cleansing when a significant number of citizens of that ethnicity will remain in the country despite the deportations, in this case, Hispanic. I'm presuming he's saying Hispanic, so the ones being discriminated against or being cleansed, rather. So, in other words, how is it ethnic cleansing if the ethnicity is still present? So, Hispanics will be here after all Hispanics or after all illegal Hispanics are deported. There will be a significant population of legal Hispanics. So the ethnicity wouldn't have been cleansed; they would still be here. P. Barnes may argue that the immigration policies target a range of ethnicities that are typically non-white and not just Hispanics, resulting in a homogeneous majority white society. If he argues this, then we would have to accept that every country with a policy of deporting illegal immigrants is partaking in ethnic cleansing, because by deporting somebody that is not part of the ethnic majority, that country would maintain its homogeneity. However, if the cleansing is of people that are non-white, P. Barnes will have to, so as a whole, not just Hispanics in particular, but excluding everyone that's not white, P. Barnes would have to explain why immigrants from majority white countries were deported in 2025, including immigrants from Georgia, Ukraine, the United Kingdom, and Canada. If the policy was meant to make the country more white, wouldn't the policies prevent these people from being deported? Additionally, Trump has shown in the past support for both student visas and H-1B work visas, with him mentioning recently that he'd be open to approving 600,000 Chinese student visas. If his goal was to make the country more white, then why would he want to import workers and students from Asian countries? Again, P. Barnes will have to explain how exactly any of Trump's policies lead to ethnic cleansing when illegal immigrants of every ethnicity have an equivalent that will remain in the US that is a citizen. That is, for every person that is deported to another country that is of a certain ethnicity, there is a citizen that has that same ethnicity that will remain in the country. If he argues that the policies target a particular ethnic group, which one does it target? And if it targets that group, how is it ethnic cleansing when that ethnicity remains? If he argues that the policies simply homogenize the country, how would this not apply to every country that has immigration policies? Is every country that deports illegal immigrants guilty of homogenizing their society and therefore also guilty of ethnic cleansing? So that's all I have. Um, I see the rest of my time.
All right. Thank you for your opening, GQ. We'll now move into the open dialogue where you guys will have up to an hour to cross examine each other. Have at it. Please begin.
Okay, let me unmute myself. Thank you for that very thought provoking opening. And look, I do accept that I do have the burden of proof in the discussion. Just a couple of points, a couple of things that you made. Obviously, yes, I think that Trump's first target is obviously Hispanic. Is obviously Hispanic people. When you look at Stephen Miller's plan and some of the quotes that he said, he has earmarked around 20 million Hispanics for deportation. There's currently 11. There's currently around 10 million who are undocumented, and there's only actually around 3 million who are living in America and are at the point where where they would normally be deported under US's current law. So when it comes to who remains and sort of creating an um, ethnic ethnically homogenous country, I think personally that it's pretty clear that the plan is to move far beyond what are the legal parameters. And I guess the gist of my argument is not that all immigration would constitute ethnic cleansing. It's just when it's disordered, when it has no clear path, when it is done in a manner that appears to be designed to cause terror, to occupy cities, to use federal funds to back up to use federal armed forces to back up ICE, then it's more than immigration. It's Australia has a quite harsh immigration policy, and obviously, if you have a country that's a majority of one ethnicity, which is usually the case, then any immigration policy, those of different ethnicities, are going to fall foul of that of deportation more than the majority ethnicity. That's not necessarily ethnic cleansing, and I know that does back up the point that you were making. But what we're seeing in Trump's unprecedented outside of other countries that have gone on to commit far worse atrocities against their people.
It sounds like you're saying the reason you consider it ethnic cleansing is because it's disordered and it causes terror. So it's the way in which he goes about it. But I think for it to be ethnic cleansing, it would have to be targeting a particular ethnicity, which doesn't seem like is the case. He's targeting people based on immigration status. And, if you're a person of that ethnicity that is a citizen, I know you mentioned some cases in your opening statement, but for the vast majority of citizens, they would still be here after all Hispanic illegals are deported.
Does it matter that? So, at least we know that at least half of those that are being targeted do have the right to be in America. They have a legal right to be here, and they've made that quite open. If that's either through
like a work visa, for example, things like this.
And DACA recipients as well. Those who were given temporary rights to be here while their claims were assessed under the Biden administration, in particular Venezuelans, who appear to be a very specific target of Trump with his fake war against Nicaragua. So yeah, it is Hispanics. But look, my main concern. I'm going to be pretty derogatory to the Trump administration here. I don't think that in a lot of cases he considers Hispanics to be of different ethnicities. He's made it perfect. He's made comments that these people are bringing bad genes into the country, which I consider to be really, really terrifying language, regardless of the legal framework that he's making. But yeah, I think that I understand what you're saying in relation to it would need to be shown that there would no longer be any population of that particular ethnicity remaining after it was over for it to be considered ethnic cleansing. When regimes start to ethnically cleanse, it doesn't always look like that. I'm sure that you've heard of the 10 steps to genocide, ethnic cleansing kind of being lumped in there as a form of genocide. Those 10 steps, the step one doesn't start with removing citizens. My main claims come from the fact that right now there is absolutely nothing stopping. Trump's ignored many of the legal challenges to what he's done. The 200 men who were sent, with the exception of Kilmar Garcia, those 200 men are still in CCOT and they have no right to any sort of legal process. They're not coming back. Trump's made that perfectly clear, even though the courts have up to this point have said that what he did was illegal. You can't declare war. Nicaragua don't have a country that they have any sort of they can't declare war against this disjointed group that really has no leadership within America.
Yeah, so I think I heard you mention at the beginning things like DACA, like people that have a legal right to be in this country.
Yeah.
But again, that doesn't relate to their ethnicities. That's about their legal status. So that might be true. Maybe he's overriding the legal system and deporting people that shouldn't be deported, but it's not on the basis of ethnicity. It's just based on their status. They're here with a legal status. Maybe he doesn't like that they're here on that status, but it's not a discrimination based on the ethnicity itself.
But the majority of
Surely,
DACA recipients, but the majority. Sorry, I interrupted. You go.
no, go ahead. No, I'm saying surely there's other ethnicities wrapped in there that aren't just Hispanic.
Well, the majority of DACA
Right,
recipients are Hispanic, right?
right. But that's a coincidence.
Vast majority of those, right? And
Right.
the majority of those, and I didn't hear Trump or Miller in the lead up mention any other ethnicities. He particularly targeted Hispanics when it came to his ire and his absolutely disgraceful lies, and the lies that he created and the stories that he made up about immigrants. And let's not forget the South Africans that Elon Musk convinced him to allow into the country based on neo-Nazi conspiracy theories. So it's pretty clear where this is targeted. Like he's not. Look, I agree that there are a minority. I believe even one of those South Africans have been caught up within have been caught up in a workplace. And look, are there people from white majority countries that have found themselves within a raid of a workplace and found themselves deported in amongst? I'd argue that they're just at the wrong place at the wrong time. They turned up for the wrong shift, and they've been deported along with a group of those that they actually want to get rid of. The specific workplaces that are being targeted are areas where are areas that traditionally are operated by people of the ethnicities that I believe that he wants to get rid of. Everything about this campaign is specifically targeted towards Hispanics.
Yeah, I would say that's a result of the majority of illegal immigrants being Hispanics. If you have a problem with illegal immigration and you look at the illegal immigrants, 90%, I don't know what the percentage is, but I'm assuming it's something like that, maybe over 90% are Hispanics, then you would target Hispanics reasonably because that's where the majority of your illegal immigration problems are. If the majority of them happen to be from, let's say hypothetically, all of our illegal immigrants are from the UK, then you would have your rhetoric on the campaign trail would be against citizens from or immigrants from the UK,
But
and the same for their workplace wherever they work. If they just so happen to work in one particular place, then you're going to target those areas reasonably. So not because you're trying to ethnically cleanse that people from that country, but just because you're trying to get rid of illegals, and that's where they happen to work.
but remember that 17 million of the 20 million that they're targeting at the moment aren't illegal immigrants.
Hmm. Right, but that's nothing to do with their ethnicity. This
And
is
we're gonna have no way of actually assessing whether they are legal or illegal.
mhm. Right, but that seems like getting rid of people that you just don't want in the country. It doesn't necessarily say
Exactly.
I'm getting right, but it's not
Exactly.
saying I don't want them in the country because they're Hispanic. It's just they happen to be Hispanic and they happen to be on some temporary, like legal status, allowed to be here in the country. But again, it's not targeted to Hispanics.
Yeah.
It's just correlation. It's not because they're Hispanics we're trying to deport them. It's just they just so
Yeah,
happen to be Hispanic.
but I think there's enough of a cumulative case to push that correlation to the causative when you actually look at the rhetoric that comes from the Trump that comes from the Trump regime in regard to Hispanic.
Hmm.
Uh, as I said before, there's like poisoning the blood of America, right? Targeted Hispanic immigration. Um, talking about genetics, putting someone like Stephen Miller in charge of putting together this campaign, someone who clearly has a cross to bear against people of particular ethnicities, and clearly believes in a white ethno state based on his actions. And the reason that he is in the Trump administration, let's not forget the reason that he is part of this plan is because of his white supremacy, is because of his views on white supremacy. It was his membership and the work that he did with anti-Islamic hate groups and with Breitbart News that actually got him his position that got him the position that he's in now. So I think that it is a big stretch to suggest that someone like that would get into a position of power like that, would create a system that definitely allows Trump to pull anyone off the street, denaturalize them, and kick them out of the country, send them to a third party country, stateless, basically, right? Send them to there's multiple cases of people who have found themselves detained. They actually had a legal right to be in the country. They've been detained. They've been removed. They find themselves in Uganda or something like that, in a country that they've never been to. My country does the same thing. They've recently signed a signed a deal that will continue to do horrific things to the nation of Nauru, in deporting a group of people that the High Court said could stay here. But I think that Stephen Miller alone, you're not going to get, and I'll admit, you're not going to find the Trump regime going, we are specifically targeting Hispanics, because that's not how politics works. That's not how things work. Right. But there are enough pieces and a cumulative enough case to put together to show that this is specifically being targeted at a particular group. Sorry, I said a lot.
No, you're good. In order to prove that it's ethnic cleansing, though, you'd have to prove that it's not just based on illegal status. And like I said, you mentioned a few cases of citizens being deported. I think it was some children that were deported with their parents, but that's because their parents were deported.
Not with their parents. They weren't deported with their parents.
They were
alone. They were being sent back, presumably to family members over in Guatemala. So we don't know. These children were detained and separated from families here,
right.
And they were being sent back to Guatemala. But this is the thing, right? We don't know if they were going to parents, because I think that a regime that would deny someone due process would also lie about where they're sending them and the conditions that they're going to in the country. But sorry, go on. Yep.
No, see, again, in this case, you'd have to prove that they were targeting those kids because they were Guatemalan. They may have made a mistake, but you'd have to say they made a mistake, or rather, they targeted them. They didn't make a mistake. They targeted them because they were Guatemalan, and we'd have to provide proof for the fact that they discriminated against them in some way, and that's why they were deported. And I feel like we'd also need to see, for it to be categorized as ethnic cleansing, we'd have to see a significant amount of deportations, or of I don't know what you would call, I guess, deportation of people that are citizens, that specifically belong to the Hispanic ethnicity, in order for it to say that's ethnic cleansing. That's what it would take for me to agree and say, okay, it's ethnic cleansing. You're just straight up, rounding up people on the basis of ethnicity and getting rid of them. But currently it's just people based on their status, and wrapped into those people are people from other countries, like I mentioned, like the UK or Ukraine or whatever.
At super low numbers, though.
Right, yeah, but it's like because of the fact that we just so happen to be, on the border with Mexico and the rest of South America, and it's just easier for those people to get here, and they're the people that need it the most, looking for economic opportunity. So
so
it's just a coincidence, I feel like.
Yeah, of course. And so look, we know that there have been US citizens that have been deported. We know of, and I believe it's currently back in the courts at the moment. They were young children there were young children who were separated from families here, much like these Guatemalan children. In those cases, yes, their parents had already been deported, again, without due process. They hadn't had the parents hadn't had a day in court to sort of talk about their asylum status. They'd just been deported. The four children, the parents weren't given the opportunity. I believe that in at least two cases, the parents actually wanted the children to stay here. I'm in Australia, to stay in the US. because they had family there. One was actually receiving treatment, so they wanted them to remain in the US, but that was denied. Right, so we do actually have cases, admittedly, a small number of cases of US citizens who have been deported. My concern is with a deceptive regime like the Trump regime is, we don't actually have any way of knowing those who are being deported now whether they are citizens or whether they do have the status to stay here. Routinely, these people aren't allowed access to any sort of legal advice. They're quite often quickly shipped around from camp to camp across the country to disorientate and to make sure that family don't actually have any don't have any ability to communicate with them, and then they find themselves in a third country. So if they're undocumented, they have no way of proving that they have citizenship anywhere, and then they're moved to a third country where they've never been. They've never been there, and they get dumped there.
Right.
So
Oh, go ahead.
So I'd suggest that there is enough framework there to say that there probably is American citizens who are being detained and are being wrapped up in this. If the American government can make such a start, if you give them every credit and say that, yeah, Kilmar Garcia, the other, I can't remember, he was the hairdresser that found himself in CCOT as well and is still in CCOT. Even if you're 100%, even if you give every benefit of every doubt and that was just a mistake, how do we know that other mistakes aren't being made currently?
Right. So I agree that maybe those are mistakes, but what I'm not hearing is that they're mistakes on the basis of race, or rather, I guess they are mistakes on the basis of race. They probably were racially profiled. They probably, looked like illegals. But it doesn't seem, it seems like a mistake. It doesn't seem like a targeting of a citizen that is Hispanic and intentionally sending them to some other country. Like I said, it seems like a mistake, like a citizen that was mistaken for an illegal immigrant, and then shipped off somewhere else.
Mm-hmm. Well, I mean, currently California has ordered Trump to stop their. I think this was about a month ago, so I don't know what's going on now, but I know that California, a federal judge ordered ICE to stop arrests in California over racial profiling concerns. And look, if we just focus on the CCOT incident. Okay, are you aware of the point scoring system that ICE agents were provided to assess whether Venezuelans were members of gangs or not?
No.
No. Okay. So they were given a checklist, right? And ICE needed to meet a certain number of points. I can share you a link to it so you can have a look at it afterwards. But they were given a point scoring system. Tattoos were part of it. That's why Trump held up the fake image of MS-13 on Kilmar Garcia's hand. Tattoos, the way they were dressed, and other racial and other things that specifically targeted Hispanics, right? And this was the way to prove that people were part of a gang. Now, I'm no expert in gangs, but from my understanding, a Trendy Aragua, like having these particular tattoos that identify you as part of a gang, is common. Is common for American gangs, like gangs that started within America, like MS-13, for example. But when it comes to Trendy Aragua, typically, if you're a criminal, you don't want to go and show it off, right? So Trendy Aragua don't actually have any particular, from my understanding, could be wrong, don't have any particular sort of identifying clothing or tattoos. Yet this checklist used. It's not even racial profiling. It's racial stereotypes that someone who is racist would actually come up with to use as a checklist to kick someone out of the country, right? That's why Kilmar was gone. That's why a number of other cases were removed. So I'd argue that yeah, it's more than racial profiling. It's more than probably racial profiling. They're specifically targeting racial stereotypes that they have bred and they have created within America.
Right. It's targeting people based on a racial stereotype, but uh, then deporting them on the basis of their status, right? It just so happens to be, like I mentioned before. Sorry if I feel like I'm going in circles, like I bring up the same
No,
thing,
no, that's okay.
but
That's okay. You're doing fine, man.
there's a correlation there. Immigrants tend to be Hispanic. The immigrants they're looking for, they're trying to deport, tend to have a certain look. So I don't disagree that it's maybe stereotyping or profiling, but it only makes sense if they see a pattern and they're detecting these type of criminals. The only way, or not the only way, but I suppose the most efficient way would be to profile them and then find out if they're citizens or not and deport the ones that aren't. Um, but that wouldn't be deportation, or rather ethnic cleansing, because if you find out they're citizens, well, presumably you don't deport them. Um, so yeah, I would need to see a significant number of cases, I feel like, of people that are citizens that are getting shipped with the people that aren't.
Yeah. Well, look, my first point is look those particular cases that were moved to CCOT, as we know now, they weren't actually deported based on their status. Over a quarter of them actually had the full, and we're not talking about like just temporary status. A quarter of them had full legal and working rights within the US. They were permanent. They were permanently allowed. They weren't citizens because there's some higher bars that need to be leapt over to become citizens. But a quarter of those people that were removed for CCOT, right, that would have been identified on the street based on skin color. They would have made the 8 points based on tattoos and what they were wearing. So, as we said, based on racial stereotypes that don't really exist in reality, but the types of racial stereotypes that are common within sort of white supremacist movements, and the I guess the perception that Trump gave of these people as killers and gang members and eating dogs and stuff like that. Quarter of them were removed just based on that alone. That's the reason that they were removed, because Trump wanted them gone. They weren't removed based on their immigration status, right? And the second thing is saying that yeah, we arrest people and then we check. I mean, do you think that that's a like you've got the Fourth Amendment, right? Like most, like having a just being searched on the street based on your skin color, then allowing the regime to decide whether you belong here or not. Not actually being allowed to see a judge to say, "Hey, judge, these guys have got it wrong. I'm actually allowed to be here. I saw a judge previously. Here's the case. Can I speak to a lawyer to find out what my rights are?" Right, and then allowing them to kick you out based on that. That's as good as a plan. Like that's as good as a plan to allow someone to just pick and choose off the street who they want gone.
Yeah, see, I'm hearing valid criticisms of like the process, but I'm not hearing that it's ethnic cleansing. You know what I mean? Like I feel like I might even agree with you on some of these. Like, yeah, maybe the process is a little, maybe they are bypassing some laws that they should be following or some process, but I don't see it as I don't see how it follows that this is ethnic cleansing.
Why do you think it is that Trump isn't using the law to do this? Like why do you think it is that Trump isn't pushing legislation that leads to some sort of reform? Why is it being done in this bulldozer way rather than it actually being a calculated reasons?
Well, I
Why do
don't
you
know
think why do
that
you think
much
that
about
is?
the legality. I don't know that much about the laws and what the process is for getting rid of these people and determining their status here. But if you believe that illegal immigration, is a big problem in this country, and you have 4 years to fix it, then presumably you would take as many measures as you could to deport as many people that you don't think belong in this country as possible.
Right. Um, well, I mean, we can talk about whether it is a problem or not, or not. So that sort of but what happens afterwards, right? Like he decided that this is like an emergency, like this is horrible, like your neighbor's going to eat your dog, right? Um, why would you not try to set something up that, like Biden tried to do? Now, I'm extremely critical of Biden and of the Democrats and what they're doing currently and what they were doing at the time. Biden presented a bill to the Republicans and to Trump that would have done much of what you're talking about, right? It would have strengthened the border. It would have created additional powers for ICE to um, be able to deport people and to move people quicker and to expedite a plan within 4 years, within one term, within two terms, right? It weakened the ability of sanctuary cities to protect migrants within their communities, right? This was a bill that was drafted in part by the Republicans, right? This was a bipartisan bill, right? Do you think that if Trump was actually interested in immigration policy, that he would have allowed that to go through? Why do you think he would? Because it was the Republicans were ready to vote on this bill. This bill had bipartisan support, but Trump and Miller knocked it on the head. They ensured
Right.
that it didn't go through.
Look, I don't know that much about the inner workings of politics, but I'm sure there's some like personal reason that he didn't sign it or whatever. He, um, wanted to cultivate power during his term, or I don't know, wanted to do it his way. Um, I'm not saying I don't disagree with you, I think. It sounds like what you're arguing though is that he's trying to set up laws or cultivate power in a way so that eventually he could change. Maybe he could potentially at some point in the future deport citizens. It sounds like what you're arguing. But I would say, well, that doesn't qualify as ethnic cleansing today. That's saying maybe in the future he could do ethnic cleansing, but that's not current. We're arguing today is it ethnic cleansing, and I think it sounds like we agree that it's not in particular. It's based on status.
What,
Um,
what I'm saying is we have a highly secretive regime that, in my view, historically and now has been very much in favor of a Christian white ethno state in the US, and they have created a system that bypasses all legal protections that people would have to stop someone from creating an ethno state. And I'm also saying that we have evidence of citizens who have been deported, and we have no way of knowing if there are not more citizens who are being deported. So what I'm
right.
saying is it's probably already going on now. The people in charge, I believe, have that desire for America. And we've got no way of knowing what is actually going on now because this regime is being deliberately secretive about what's actually going on. So no, I don't agree. It's not now. I think that it's going on. I think that it is going on now. I think there's enough of a cumulative case to show that that's the intention, right? Like I said before, things don't regimes don't start off deporting people. They start with planning. They start with propaganda campaigns to dehumanize populations, which has already happened, right? If Trump had legitimate reasons as to why he wanted to crack down on immigration, he would have mentioned them. He didn't, right? He went on rants about Hannibal Lecter and about um, electrified sharks and all other sorts of nonsense during his rallies, right? He stood in front of billions of people worldwide and repeated what he knew to be a neo-Nazi conspiracy theory about Haitians eating dogs, right? At the time, that had been debunked weeks ago. Like the woman had already said weeks before, no, I found my cat. My cat was in the basement. I've apologized to my neighbors. They didn't eat my pet, right? But the local Ohio neo-Nazi group, Blood Tribe, continued to push it. JD Vance pushed it. And then when Trump was cornered in front of billions of people, he said it. Like there were bomb threats, like there were terrorist threats in that town afterwards. I don't see why. I don't see how any of this has anything to do with immigration. This is Trump's personal beliefs on personal. This is Trump, Miller, the Heritage Foundation. It's their personal beliefs on Hispanics. It has nothing to do with immigration.
Hmm. Right. It's his beliefs on this particular ethnicity of people, but
Right.
um, I wouldn't say we have proof that those beliefs have passed into ethnic cleansing. I feel like the standard for ethnic cleansing is pretty high. Like you'd have to see the ethnicity as a whole affected, and yeah, you see some citizens affected, but it sounds like those are mistakes or one-offs. It's not many cases. It's not enough to warrant, I don't know, the term ethnic cleansing, I feel like.
Would you agree? Would you agree that if those standards, to at least start being alarmed about what's going on, if those standards were lower in the past, then perhaps we could have prevented some pretty bad shit from going on?
The standards, what do you mean?
Like you're saying that the standard to actually call it ethnic cleansing
Hmm.
needs to be higher than what we're currently saying. I don't know. I don't know how. Well, actually, that's probably a pretty good question, right? So if what was going on now was ethnic cleansing, what would be different? Like
It would
some
be
specific. What are some specific things that you think would be happening differently currently for it to rise to the level of ethnic cleansing?
You would have to see a significant or an equal number of citizens and illegal immigrants being deported. So basically 50-50, because there's no discrimination on the basis of legal status, which there is now. Presumably, the vast majority of people that are deported actually are illegal immigrants. There is some reason to deport them, or at least weren't born here, or something. Even if they're on a temporary visa or they have some type of legal status, maybe they're not citizens here. Um, I don't know the numbers, but I'm sure if you look at the people that are deported, yeah, maybe there's like a few citizens in there that are deported mistakenly. Um, but the vast majority of citizens that are Hispanic are still here in the United States, and the vast majority of deportees that are Hispanic, are deported because of their legal status. Now, if you saw like a 50-50 split or anywhere close, right, like 30% of Hispanics that are deported were born here and had citizenship, then yeah, I would consider that ethnic cleansing, because now it's on the basis of their ethnicity.
Right. I hate to be like, so we'd have to wait until we can prove that it's 30% citizens that are being removed before
Right.
we could.
Right. I mean, you couldn't prove it's ethnic cleansing today because, I mean, yeah, it's still on the basis, there's still like a valid reason for deportation, right? Once you start seeing, if you one day start seeing citizenship or deportation of Hispanic citizens like ramping up, then yeah, of course, that would seem to be ethnic cleansing.
Okay. I'd argue we're seeing that ramping up now. And look, as I said, we just don't know. We don't know
Mhm.
whether these people that, and we do have cases that they did deliberately. We know that there have been not mistakes. We know that they have deliberately removed U.S. citizens. A couple of other questions just on the I guess on the what I call propaganda that happened before, and I guess some of the reasons that I'm quite suspicious of what this regime's doing. Right? Do you think that it's do you think that it's a concern that what was sold to the American public when it comes to immigration was that um, they're murderers, they're killers, they're rapists, they're emptying he went on a very protracted campaign to all immigrants as someone that you should be afraid of as an American citizen. Do you think it's concerning now that the vast majority of people that are being detained have never committed a crime, like zero crimes? Like most of them, not even the not even their entry to America was done illegally. Like they're not illegal immigrants; they're just immigrants, right? Do you think it's Do you think it's suspicious that the that what was on the package isn't what we're seeing?
I would say that maybe the propaganda was, I mean, that's what it is. Maybe propaganda, maybe it's slander, demeaning a race or ethnicity of people. But um, no, yeah, like I said, I feel like the standard for ethnic cleansing is kind of high. So, I mean,
But you would agree that ethnic cleansing does begin with a protracted propaganda campaign
I
like
think
that that's
it could
designed to.
potentially, but I mean, for it to be ethnic cleansing, you have to see evidence of the ethnic cleansing, right? You can't say propaganda is. We see anti propaganda of against a certain, ethnicity. Therefore, it's ethnic cleansing.
That's always where it starts, though. That's always the
Right.
starting. That's always the starting point. Like, I
Right. And we
mean,
can make the case in the future that, like I said, maybe one day it becomes ethnic cleansing, and maybe I'd agree. But I think currently where it's at, like there's still a reasoning for it, even though it's one we may not agree with, that it's, removing people that have some type of legal status, but
yeah.
it's different than citizenship.
Like, even if we drill down on stuff like you would have heard about fentanyl a lot during the election campaign, right?
Hmm.
What's the perception of what's the perception that you got of fentanyl, of the fentanyl crisis within America when it comes to immigration? What do you what do you think that the main sort of talking points were from Trump and the Republican Party when it comes to fentanyl?
Well, I don't know, to be honest, other than that it's trafficked across the border, but I don't know anything much more than that, to be honest.
Yeah, and look, it is trafficked across the border, but it's usually at ports of entry. Like, the vast majority of fentanyl comes into the US through ports of entry or through traffic stops, and 81% or over 80% of fentanyl seizures are actually from American citizens. So there's very little correlation between things. But these things were tied together, right? We were told that, or Americans and the international community looking at this election, looking at the 2024 election, they were sold that, hey, we're going to solve the fentanyl crisis by stopping immigration at the border, which was a lie. It was that was never going to happen, right? Um, and also on the like and just broadly on the crime stats, like as I said before, I find it highly suspicious that Americans were sold um, this story of immigrants all being criminals, right? Where when who was it? I think it was Stanford that did a study of 140 years of American crime statistics. The likelihood of an immigrant being incarcerated is 60% lower than people born in the United States, and it's been like that since day dot. Like, immigrants have always been, which intuitively makes sense, right? Because you think, if I'm trying to actually become a citizen of a country, I'm probably going to pull my socks up and I'm probably going to do the right thing. So I understand what you're saying, that to your standards, it hasn't reached the level that would be considered ethnic cleansing right now. But my concern is there's a lot of suspicious stuff that went on in the lead up to it. Everything that Trump has said about his immigration policy has been a lie up until this point. And right now we just don't know. We know that there have been US citizens deported. We don't know how many, and we don't know what's going on because these people don't see a judge.
Right. Yeah, so again, like I agree, maybe there's some issue with the process. Like I said, I feel like I'm repeating myself. But I don't think it's my standard. I think it's definitionally, that he's attempting to create an ethnically homogenous, country. Um, I don't think that is the purpose, right? At least that's what he says, and we don't see evidence necessarily because if he was trying to create an ethically homogenous country, then like I said, you would see it affecting citizens as well. And until it does, um, I don't think you can say that that's what he's doing, because like I said, there's still going to be citizens here. If at the end of all the deportations, he's like, all right, we're done, like we're not targeting Hispanics anymore because all the illegals are out, then um, well, there's no ethnic cleansing because
Well, the
all the Hispanics
illegals,
are still here.
the illegals plus a lot of people who are legally allowed to be, and who are
Right.
legally allowed to be
Right.
to
Like
be in the
he
US.
may be overreaching, and some of those may happen to be Hispanic, but like I said, presumably citizens, like people born here, Hispanics, would still be here, and until those people are affected somehow, um, the society isn't as homogenous as it could be. If Trump was like a Hitler, type, getting rid of every Jew, you know what I'm saying? Like, um, yeah, at that point,
Well, I
it'd be
mean,
ethnic cleansing.
he does push the cultural Marxism conspiracy theory, and he used that very heavily in his campaign. But that's probably another topic for another day. Um, and look, I for me, it does rise to the standard, and a lot of other sort of international agencies are quite concerned that it's reached the standard. And I think that to what we were saying, to my point before, I think that if the standard to get the standard to call something directly ethnic cleansing, yeah, it probably does have a definition. Um, the standard to start getting concerned that it has the potential to become ethnic cleansing, I think is far lower. And I think that if it had been far lower in the past, um, I think that we could have prevented. I think that we could have prevented a lot of tragedies that were going on. Right in Rwanda, if the international community had stepped in and gone, "Hey, Germany, do you really think you should be handing out people cards that don't actually have any biological basis to them, just based on the shape of people's skulls and their height? Do you really think you should be classifying this group of people into two specific ethnicities and then forcing them to fight each other? Do you really think that's a good idea?" And if the international community had stepped in early on and said, "Hey, maybe this is a pretty shitty idea, Belgium. Maybe you shouldn't do it," then what happened potentially could have been avoided.
Right.
So
I
on,
don't know.
so
I don't know that much
go,
about this case that you mentioned. But yeah, like I don't disagree with you. Maybe it has the potential to be ethnic cleansing, but I mean, today, just based on the definition, I don't think it meets that.
okay. Well, look, probably the last point that I guess I wanted to ask about is, again, we're looking back at the legal framework. Another part of Biden's border protection bill, which I consider to be quite conservative, and I found that bill quite concerning as well, and I wouldn't have supported that either. Um, Another part of it was increasing funding to actually process people's claims, right? Um, if so, theoretically, let's say Trump is concerned about immigration and he has legitimate reasons to be concerned. Do you think that he would increase the funding or increase funding to the systems and the judicial system that's in place to actually expedite people being removed from the country? Do you think he would increase funding for that, or would he
Yeah,
decrease? Do you think that
yeah.
that's something that he'd do?
Presumably, if that was his goal, then yeah, of course, that's what
Yeah,
he would do. But I'm sure he has some other plans in mind.
it's the opposite.
Um,
He did the opposite.
right.
He's capped the number of judges that can actually hear cases. He has reduced the funding. He has capped the number of appellate judges, and he has restricted and kept it. While he's increasing detention and deportation, he's decreased the number of people that can actually hear them if they were actually allowed to be heard in front of a judge. And I think in the most despicable action, ISA they're staking out courts so that when people turn up to what they think is going to be a court case, they get bundled up by someone in a mask, bundled into an unmarked car, and then wake up 48 hours later in Uganda. Like it's a and we have no and again we have no way of knowing. They might have walked into that judge and the judge said, "Yeah, absolutely, you have a right to be here. Here you go. Enjoy being an American citizen." But no, there's blocks being put that's preventing people of specific ethnicities from being able to access the access citizenship. And at the same time, and yeah, Elon Musk had a hell of a lot to do with the South African deal, but we're opening our. I keep saying we. I keep forgetting in this debate that I live halfway across the world, literally on the other side of the world. But the US, like choosing who comes into the US and the deal that the US did with South Africa, yeah, it was probably had a lot to do with Elon Musk, but the arms are open for whites, but not for Hispanics.
Hmm. And again, I would say I would bring up Trump being open to the 600,000 Chinese students coming in. I know that's not like a policy or anything that he's signed, but it sounds like he's supportive of that. He's supportive of H-1B visas. Um, so I mean, that would seem kind of counterintuitive if his goal was ethnic cleansing.
Mm.
Um, I guess this is to the
They're the
point of
ones
like
that
homogeneity.
he'd canned originally, right? And he was forced to change his mind on
The ones that he'd what, sorry?
because he'd cancelled those visas
Hmm.
originally, hadn't he? So he kind of
Um,
did a U-turn on them.
yeah, I don't know. I just heard him say like I'd be open to 600,000 more Chinese students being in the country.
And look, I didn't want to bring it up because I haven't had a chance to do any sort of independent research on it. But I know that a Hyundai plant in Georgia was raided just overnight. This has been the trouble. This has been the troubling thing about researching for this because it's just happening every day. More and more bad shit just happens every day. That it's really really hard to keep up. Which is part of the tactic. You overwhelm the what's the baseball term? You flood the zone or whatever it is. I don't know baseball. Again, other side
I
of the
don't
world.
know.
So yeah, there was a Hyundai factory in Georgia that was raided, and I believe there were a lot of Korean nationals that were Korean immigrants that were dolled up in that. So
Right,
cool. Do
and
you
I
have
would bring
any? Sorry, go.
no, lastly, I would bring up the other white. I mean, I know it's like a tiny minority. It must be like a handful of people. But I mean, there are white immigrants that get deported as well. So, presumably, if you were doing ethnic cleansing, you would ask people before deporting them, or you would check off a box saying, "Oh, these people are white. Let's not deport these ones." Um,
Yeah. Um, have you heard about the? That's another thing that I just thought about when it comes to sort of the white actually showing that it's particular ethnicities and it's actually something that's targeting white people. Um, do you remember the travel insurance that's now going to be charged to people from certain countries when they're visiting and when they're applying for a visa? I can't remember. I don't have it
no,
in
I'm not
my
familiar.
notes. So basically, what they announced is that people traveling from certain countries have to pay an additional bond, right? To sort of to satisfy the U.S. government that they're going to actually leave when they come here, and it's all based around the problem of immigration. Now, countries like the U.S. that have, like the U.K., a huge number of people overstay their visas from the UK, right? Huge numbers of people from Europe, but that's a volume thing, right? Because there are a lot of people who travel to the US on tourist visas. They overstay. They're not being targeted by the current regime, mind you, but countries that they actually have a problem weren't targeted. So basically, the way that this travel bond would work is you have to pay an amount of money to secure your travel visa, and you only get that money back if you leave. If you come here and you claim asylum, you also lose that money. You also lose that money as well. The countries that they were targeting had probably 50 people who traveled to the US, but they're Islamic countries in Africa. They've all got one correlation. They're of a particular skin color. So yeah, again, I'd argue this is targeted. there's a lot of problems. If you want to say that the US has a problem with immigration, it does have a problem with Europe and people from Europe and the UK overstaying visas as well. Did you have any other questions or any other topic points that you wanted to?
I really had nothing to add, to be honest. Yeah, like I feel like I keep coming back to like the standard for ethnic cleansing, and I just don't feel like it meets it. I feel like we're still on the
Yeah.
basis of immigration, of status.
Yeah.
So until, like I said, until citizens are getting deported in droves, then I don't think we can say it qualifies as ethnic cleansing. Maybe there's some evidence of profiling of, you know, grouping certain types of people and confusing them, and citizens get mixed in there, but
Yeah.
not targeted based on ethnicity yet.
I'm heartened by the fact that at least you do seem a little bit concerned about what's going on. I'll take that as a win.
I don't know if concern would be the right word, but I can
Yeah.
recognize, I'm sure we'd agree on like certain, if you pointed out like, oh, this is like some legal process that should be followed for people that have a
Absolutely.
temporary legal status here or something, then yeah, I'm sure maybe we'd agree. But yeah, and I'm sure maybe potentially, if if you garner more power, I could see how eventually maybe it could be ethnic cleansing. But currently, it's just on a basis of status. So that's where
I'd be satisfied with them just following the Constitution. That'd be enough for me at the moment, which they're not, which they're pushing the boundaries of. And Trump said that he doesn't know whether he has to uphold the Constitution, and he said that that it should be suspended when he sees fit. So.
Well, it sounds like this debate is winding down, gentlemen. So I guess I'll wrap it up. We now come to the close of our debate. We'll let each debater make a short closing statement if they wish. And we really only had one audience question, and I don't think it's that good of one. So we'll kind of skip that too. So since P Barnes opened first, we'll let GQ close first if he'd like to go.
Okay, sure. I think P. Barnes brought up a lot of good points regarding immigration and some of the issues regarding immigration and racial profiling and citizens being deported mistakenly. Maybe some of them not mistakenly, maybe targeted, but he didn't bring up, or he didn't give evidence of them being targeted, or citizens being targeted based on their ethnicity, or not being deported necessarily because of their ethnicity. They may have been profiled and confused. But we have yet to see a significant amount of citizens being deported due to their ethnicity. When an ethnicity as a whole gets targeted, then that's when I would say it meets the standard for ethnic cleansing, the definition for ethnic cleansing. But until then, there's still we're still considering them on the basis of their immigration status and not on their ethnicity. The day we see that, maybe I'd agree with them and say, yeah, citizens are getting deported and at the same rate as immigrants. Then yeah, that would be on the basis of ethnicity, but currently it's based on their country of origin or their immigration status or what have you. So that's why I would say it's not ethnic cleansing.
Great. Well, thank you for that, GQ. P Barnes, you'd like to make a closing statement?
Yeah, absolutely. Firstly, thanks so much, GQ. You did challenge my thoughts on my thoughts on the topic as well, and kept me honest when it came to actually presenting evidence. You can't tell it's not your first debate. You did a really good job, so thank you. Look, on the topic, I don't understand the material difference between an immigration force that targets people based on racial profiling, or in this case, based on stereotype profiling, which is what it is, and based on a very white supremacist centric stereotype of what Hispanic people are and what they do and their place within American society. So I don't really understand the meaningful difference between those two enough to sort of concede that I didn't show that these people are being targeted specifically for their ethnicity. And for the rest of my closing argument, is probably an appeal to any Americans that watch this, that are listening. If you see ICE, you're legally allowed to videotape them. A lot of the reasons that people are being saved from deportation in situations is because people are actually documenting what's going on. I'm not suggesting anyone put themselves in danger, but unless you live in a state like Florida where you do actually have to stay back, don't get involved. But if you see something going on, videotape it. This is the way that American citizens seem to be holding people accountable. And if there is ethnic cleansing going on, the only way I fear that we're going to see this is through people actually standing up and holding American citizens accountable. And lastly, thanks so much, Let's Farm, for moderating.
Absolutely. Hey, and we did get one question that I am willing to ask,
Hey, there
and
we
this
go.
this one's for GQ. It said, GQ, do you believe Jesus Christ, who himself was an undocumented immigrant when he fled to Egypt, would be deported under your immigration policies?
Would he be deported? If he was an illegal immigrant, sure. I don't see why not.
All right, that was from Phoenix person. All right. So, I'd like to thank you guys for this debate. This was really nice. It was civil and informative. I enjoyed it myself. And I'd like to thank our audience for coming tonight. And I hope you enjoyed our show. If these guys have any links that they'd like to share, I will put them in the description. And please consider subscribing to their channels too if they have one. Remember to hit the like button if you like the show. Also consider subscribing to our channel and hitting that bell to make sure that you do not miss any of our exciting content coming up. Thanks again for coming. Remember, let's not fight, let's debate.